Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Paul Deacon, and I've got the honour to be facilitator for the evening. And you could be doing lots of other things on a summer's evening, so we really appreciate your time today. I come from a recruitment background. I've been running a legal recruitment business for 20 years, so I've got an understanding of the topic, but I'm surrounded by what I would say are three geniuses in their field. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know that I'm not sure I can take genius, but thank you anyway.
Very, very well known. I'm going to take it in turns to introduce you and then just ask each of you individually to tell us a little bit about your background. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Emma May. And Emma, you're Director of Operations and Employment at Work Avenue.
I am.
Background is you are a law graduate from Manchester University and a qualified HR professional. So you've got the background in HR management, psychometric assessment, outplacement, and careers guidance. And you've held roles in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. You support the overall management of Work Avenue, and you're also responsible for the provision of all services to your job-seeking clients. You describe yourself as the chief people pleaser. Is that right?
Hopefully not that cheap in the nasty sense, but yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you can add value?
Myself or my organisation?
Your organisation, but obviously that imparts a lot of your personality as well.
So, hi everyone, nice to see you all this evening. As Paul said, my name is Emma May. Some of you, nice to see you, those that, one or two of you I know already. Nice to see those of you who I know, and also those of you who are new to me. Thank you very much for inviting me. My official job title, as Paul said, is Director of Operations and Employment at Work Avenue. Bit of a grandiose title. What that means basically, the employment bit, well, it means I'm responsible for delivering all our service provision to our job-seeking clients at Work Avenue. And the ops bit is kind of I help run the organisation as well. So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid role, get involved with both sorts. If this is, I mean, I don't know, Paul, do you want me to talk a little bit about our services now? Or?
I think so. I think it's very useful. I think we're a few minutes each speaker just at the moment. So I'm sure we've got time to speak later on, but definitely in terms of where you can add value.
Certainly. So some of you may have come across Work Avenue before, and either if you have or you haven't, we're here, Work Avenue, to ensure that everyone can earn a living. And as you know, people probably earn a living in one of two ways. They either get a job, in other words, you become employed. Alternatively, you start a business, you're entrepreneurial. In other words, you become self-employed. So it's either employment or self-employment. My organisation, Work Avenue, we work with approximately 2,000 clients every year. And whichever way you look at people, right across the community, we work with those people. So obviously men and women, people from all sorts of educational backgrounds, working backgrounds, jobs, right across the religious spectrum as well. There is a place for everyone at Work Avenue. My colleagues, we're all qualified, we're all experienced professionals. And we also reflect the community as well, which is quite important. And, reflecting the nature of how the world is, approximately 3/4 of our clients are looking for work, and the remaining quarter are looking to start a business and become entrepreneurial. Our services to everyone, to job seekers and to entrepreneurs alike, are all free. So think of it like a series of menu options that any client can dip into, as many one-to-one meetings as you want with a professional and qualified advisor, a series of workshops, webinars, different events. We can offer grants to help people retrain. People can borrow laptops of us. We have employment law advice, access to loan funding if you're starting a business, and very, very importantly, two really important services we can offer. We place people in work. We have a jobs board. We actually place people in employment. And we've just started a really exciting social enterprise where it basically We like to think of it as poetry in motion in our world. We upskill people so they become able to earn their own living, but we offer their services to small businesses so the small businesses can grow, so the entrepreneurs can earn a living as well. So it's a really fantastic, exciting service. And the training in our social enterprise is virtually free, guaranteed work experience, a fantastic springboard for people to go out into the workplace. We understand only too well the challenges people face in today's workplace. I mean, there have always been challenges, but no challenges like the year that we're all going to be talking about, the year that we've all had. Me and my colleagues, we also are very well aware of, people's mental well-being, mental health. We're all qualified in mental health first aid. But at the same time, we want to remain positive. We want to remain upbeat, welcoming, warm. And really are aiming to make a positive difference to all our clients, helping them towards the worlds of work, grow their business so that each and every one can earn a living with dignity to support themselves and their families.
Well, Emma, I mean, that's fantastic, the work that you're doing. I'm sure it's very appreciated by the whole community. And with that in mind, we turn to Victoria Sterman, and your background. You joined Resource as its first chief executive in 2013, having spent the majority of your career in leadership positions within the pharmaceutical marketing consultancy. You've got a depth of expertise in recruitment, onboarding, resource management, people development and training. So Victoria, tell us a little bit about Resource. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap with Work Avenue, but I know each of you offers very distinct services to the community.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And yes, there is some overlap, and we feel that we complement each other beautifully. So I will just briefly tell you about Resource. So we were established almost 30 years ago by Jewish Care, and we see ourselves as the community's go-to resource, helping people get into employment. We work with job seekers to build their skills and to boost their confidence, really empowering them to secure the right job for them. Our aim is that no one has to face unemployment alone. We work with a highly skilled team of professional volunteers to deliver our services, and we help around about 1,000 people each year in their job search. And our team of volunteers are very wide ranging in expertise, including management consultants, solicitors, HR professionals, pharmacists, and many more as well. So thanks to the support of generous donors, our services are all free. The way we work is dedicated advisors give each client expert guidance and advice, tailoring their journey of one-to-one support, workshops, webinars and seminars. We've got 12 different workshops that we offer, including developing networking skills, interview skills. We do a lot of work on LinkedIn, communication and presentation, and so on. So who uses our services? Well, our clients come predominantly from the Jewish community, from every walk of life, every occupation and profession, regardless of any religious observance, regardless of age, from the high-flying CEO to the person with absolutely no secular qualifications at all, or no work experience, and many, many in between. So we're based in Finchley in North London, but our services are all available now online, which has meant that we've been able to help people nationwide. So just finally, we describe our programme like a journey into employment, starting with an initial appointment with an advisor thinking about job search strategy, developing CVs, writing good applications. And everything we do is focused on helping unemployed people get back into work so that no one faces unemployment alone. We describe ourselves as professional cheerleaders, supporting clients with encouragement from beginning to the end of their job search. Thank you.
Victoria, thank you for that excellent cheerleading and the work that you're doing as well. And finally, on our stellar cast, we turn to Annette, Kurer, and you are a global leadership consultant, a motivational speaker who qualified as a dentist before managing multi-million pound international businesses in the corporate world for businesses such as Unilever and Pearl & Dean. You launched Art Consultants in 2004, which transformed the ability into profitability through a combination of consultancy, coaching and training. Art Consultants empowers leaders to communicate effectively, manages relationships, and supports people to pursue a career journey that fulfills their potential. That fits in very neatly with Art UK, which you've been involved in since 2016, and you became the chair of that fantastic organization in January 2021. So tell us a bit about your journey and how your organization really assists in these trying days.
Well, thank you very much. And again, it's just showing us in the Jewish community what phenomenal resource is available to everyone. And it's you know, we're all different people, and it's great to have that breadth of experience. And as you say, with the donor support, it is free to the people. Now, ORT is all about impact through education. And ORT was actually formed in Russia in 1880. And its aim was to equip impoverished communities with the skills to gain employment and become self-sufficient. And that is the thread that carries on through today. And we continue with this same ethos, having grown to offer life-changing education and emotional support to over 200,000 beneficiaries around the globe. Now, this year, ORT UK actually celebrates its 100th year with the campaign There, Then, Here, Now. And ORT UK has been supporting students since 1921. So it is, in fact, the centenary year, and we're celebrating that. And, you know, we support, particularly through our domestic project, ORT Jump. We're supporting students, and particularly in this last 12 months, helping to mitigate the impact that the pandemic has had on our students' education. And we all know that the students have really suffered. So have the parents if they've been working at home and trying to homeschool. Fortunately, my kids have left, so that's much, much better. But schools closed last March. ORT Jump, which is a mentor-mentee partnership between mentors from all across the community, and they are mentoring year 12 students, so 16, 17-year-olds. And we actually this year have hit a record of over 310 partnerships, and we're expanding that as we speak. We're expanding it nationwide. We're connecting to teenagers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. It's not just Jewish schools, and we're partnering with Langdon to support students. And what we do is we open the eyes of some of these students to what lies ahead in terms of entrepreneurship, networking, recruitment, and tech startups. And often it's the first time they've had an opportunity to interact with people, with adults who aren't from the family. So what we say is that, you know, the mentors need to speak to the students and get them to open up about, do they like to interact with people? Would they rather be on computers? Do they want to earn as much money as possible? Is there something meaningful? Is that important to them? And really help them open up their thoughts and try and put a framework together about the CV, because I know from Victoria and Emma, some of the frustrations are when youngsters have no work experience or they haven't ever volunteered, and it's that much harder. So we're opening up their minds at that age and putting some sort of framework together to support them to think about who they are, not about the career they want. And as someone who's changed their career 5 times, and I think all of us with children similar ages, we know that they don't come out of university, they don't come out of school knowing what job they want. So it's important for all of us to empower the younger generation to think broadly about what suits them.
Well, you know, thank you all for giving your time tonight. And the best sort of session will be interactive. So if we say something during the chat that you want to immediately address, just put your hand up. You can send a chat so we can deal with it after the presentation, or you can send in an anonymous or named email after the event, because we're here really to help you today to answer any queries that you've got. So without further ado, just in relation to searching for a job right now, obviously it can look daunting. Can I ask Emma firstly, what's your advice, top tips for someone looking for a job right now?
There's a lot of things to think about when you're job searching, and as Victoria also mentioned, there's so much advice and guidance to help you in the community. But despite all of that, you know, we can break this down into some real top tips. So if we're talking about your job searching, first of all, I think the first tip to think about is that, quite honestly, searching for work is full-time work in itself. So don't think of it as something that you can just, pick up and put down in an instant without thinking. It has to be your priority, your focus, and really give it the bulk of your commitment. Having said that, do balance your time. Think about how how you work, how you prioritize, how you apportion your time. Balance your time between, thinking about jobs on the open market that you see advertised, and also those that are not necessarily advertised, the conversations that you have with people, networking, to think about that. Also balance your time with taking breaks and refreshing. In other words, just as you would in your working day, break your time down into bite-sized portions that is manageable, but at the same time completely focused. Be clear what you're looking for and understand exactly what's going to be the right job for you. And at the same time, how much wriggle room you have, you want to give yourself with regard to the role. So for example, are you just looking for a job as an administrator? Can you also consider a role as office manager or secretary, perhaps? Those roles do exist in various places. Or is it just administration that you're looking for? Now, on the one hand, you could say that I'm playing with words, but actually when it comes to your job search, each will have separate search fields. So it's good to have that conversation with yourself to understand. Think also about the specific skills and experience you need to have in relation to your role. Certain things are really, really important for a role, but at the same time, think generally, because actually so many jobs have so many transferable skills. In other words, skills, abilities, experience, competence that you have brought from all aspects of your life, your working life, your social life, your private life, things you do in as a volunteer perhaps. And so many of those can also be really, really helpful and instructive as you're filling your next role or looking to fill your next role. I would also say be creative with your job search. So many people find that they engage with one or two, perhaps websites that they find helpful and good, and they become very familiar with them. Sometimes you need to shake it up a little bit. Think creatively where else there may be opportunities to look. Facebook, for example, social media has become a really fertile searching place for different types of opportunities, different networking groups, different job search groups. Think about different job titles that are alternatives that you might apply for. And so take a step back sometimes, take a breath, and refresh your thinking about what you're looking for as well. It goes without saying that you should take advice. There is so much, as I said, in the community resource, us at Work Avenue. And the final bit of sort of top tip that I would like to say about job searching in general terms is recognize the tasks that take priority. Don't be, and it's an awful thing to say, but don't be a busy fool. Sometimes we can go down a bit of a rabbit warren in terms of getting distracted and very focused over a particular task of our job search that just may not be yielding sensible and productive outcomes. Busy doesn't necessarily mean productive. So really think carefully about your time and make it as productive as possible.
Excellent, Emma. What do you think, Victoria? What would your advice be for somebody looking for a job?
Build upon some of the things that Emma has talked about that I wholeheartedly agree with. I think I'd like to mention the role of networking in your job search, because a key part of finding a job is to make sure that everyone knows you're looking for one. I think it's good to tell everybody, friends and family, former colleagues, your parents' friends, your friends of parents. The key thing is that jobs are so often found by word of mouth. We'd call it the hidden job market, which accounts for probably around 70% of all jobs are actually never advertised. So if they're not advertised, how do you know about them? How do you find out about them? Well, it's talking to people word of mouth. Also on networking, I'd really recommend using LinkedIn. It's an excellent tool. It's free to use. You can control your privacy settings. We at Resource or at Work Avenue 2 can teach you how to use it, and it's very, very effective. Just sort of talk about some top tips for interviewing. There's a few things I'd recommend taking into account. It is a crowded market, it's a difficult jobs market right now, and so I'd really recommend you prepare as much as possible. I like to say, be the best prepared candidate for the role. This includes finding out as much as you can about the company that you're interviewing at. And please don't just read the website. The mistake is just to read the website and feel that you've done your preparation. You can do so much more than that. As part of your preparation, think about the 3 questions that the interviewer is bound to ask you in some form or other. They're going to ask themselves, really, can you do the job? Do you want to do the job? And are you going to fit into their organisation? So think about those when you do your planning. And I would definitely arrange to have a practice interview with a friend or a family member or someone at Work Avenue or someone at Resource. But really, to go into the real interview without having done a practice is a wasted opportunity. If you have a practice, it will give you the confidence to go into the real thing better prepared. And if you do something with a mock interview with Work Avenue or Resource, you'll get some really constructive feedback that will help your preparation even further.
And one thing that, of course, we haven't yet mentioned is kind of one of the biggest parts of an application process in the UK, which of course is the CV. Really, really important. Not every country actually uses CVs like we do in this country, but certainly in the UK, very, very prevalent. Sooner or later, you'll have a conversation through networking or through an application, and eventually someone's going to say, oh, tell them to send them in their CV. You have to have a CV one way or another. So just a bit of guidance about a CV. Again, a few top tips. Think like an employer. How would they look at your CV? Many people write a CV autobiographically, but of course your CV is not your autobiography. It's actually, think about it, your sales document. It's the way that you sell yourself to an employer. So think how you can sell yourself the best through your CV. Really, really important. Nobody wants your life story. They just want to know what makes you special and exciting and perfect fit for the job that you've applied for. It needs to be tailored. It needs to be really perfect so it stands out for that particular job that you're applying for. There's always a temptation to absolutely make your CV your dump of absolutely everything that a person can possibly know about you in the workplace. But so often, as in life, less can actually be more. So, there is a received wisdom that, a CV shouldn't be more than 2 pages, and there's probably some truth to that wisdom. But what's really, really important, that everything on your CV is tailored, as I said, to the needs of that job. And you just take off anything that is going to distract the reader, in other words, the employer or the recruitment consultant or whoever it might be. Take off anything that's going to distract them from thinking how right you are for the job that you're applying for. We would always say that, instead of thinking about your job and your previous work history in terms of a series of tasks that you had to do in your job, think about what you've done and what you've delivered that actually made a difference to employers you've worked with. And if you haven't worked, think about what you've done in a voluntary sense, in a communal sense, in your private life, that's actually made a difference. In other words, think in terms of the impact that you've had up till now, the outputs you've delivered, the outcomes, not necessarily in terms of the inputs. Sounds complicated, but really it's a very, very simple technique, and one that we can advise you on. Victoria undoubtedly can also advise you on, her and her team. So it's just a little bit of a mindset change to think about how you populate the content of your CV. And on the subject of which, final point, create what we would call a coherent narrative. Tell the tale of what brings you to the point of applying for this role and why you're right for it. If it makes sense to an employer as to why your CV is in front of them, they're going to understand, they're going to be interested, they're going to want to talk to you. CVs can feel terribly overwhelming and almost like something that you feel can trip you up in terms of not getting it right. The beautiful thing about working on your CV is that there's so much advice and guidance from people who really can help you. So for the likes of Victoria and me, this is our bread and butter. This is what we know what we're doing. So if you feel that this is something that's holding you back, don't worry about it. There are so many people that can help you create a really strong, powerful, contemporary, and also elegant CV.
We've had a good question from Alex, which is related to this point. Firstly, he's very complimentary of the advice received so far, so that's a good start. But secondly, he asks, or she asks, what is different about the job process, looking for a job post-pandemic than pre-pandemic? Do you sense different nuances, different tactics that one should, adapt now in light of this unique circumstance we all face? Victoria.
Can I start, and Emma and Annette?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that there are some differences. In fact, one of the first things is to say, a lot of people come to us both and sort of say, well, what's the point of even looking for a job in a pandemic? Because surely there are no jobs and everyone I know has been made redundant or on furlough. And we would want to say loud and clear, there are jobs. Our clients are all getting jobs every day. There are lots of jobs.
And we would agree.
They may not be in events management or in the travel industry. They may not have been in retail or restaurants, but now they're really picking up. There are lots of jobs out there. Some of the differences we're noticing, employers are looking for much more versatility. They're looking to, because they'll be recruiting people who they may never meet, and they'll be working or at least onboarding them, bringing them into the company remotely. They're really keen for people who are flexible, who don't need a huge amount of hand-holding. So they need to be able to demonstrate that in their CV and their application process. And so some of the words that we'd suggest they put in the CV, some of the descriptions and explanations about how they've been able to work remotely. Also that they don't look afraid of the technology. And again, we would offer sort of IT training and hand-holding on that, just to give people confidence that they can put themselves out there, and they can set up their computer on their own at home. They won't have an IT department when they're at home. So the interview process will all be remote. So really important to practice with the technology. If you get told that your interview is going to be on Zoom, practice with Zoom. If it's going to be on Google Meets or Blue Jeans or Teams, get those and practice it first. I don't think there are any that you can't download a free version and practice with it, so that you can be on a bit early. I'll hand over to Emma for things that talking about the dressing your room and there's just too much I could probably talk about. So.
Yeah, we can talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours. I think Victoria made a really strong and valid point about the way people have to demonstrate versatility and flexibility. I would add to that point that by the same token, a lot of employers are more prepared to give that level of flexibility and versatility as well. The pandemic has changed a lot of things in life, don't we know it? Some of them not for good, but some of them for good. And I would say that is one of the positives that have come out of this, the sort of the approaches to flexibility and diversity that are coming out. And to Victoria's point about jobs, yes, yes, and yes. I mean, the market, I think I'm very fortunate. I tend to have quite a positive outlook on life myself. So I will always see something that's good. And I am seeing a market that is beginning to pick up again. And I think it's been very easy to see the dark side of life during the last year. Goodness only knows we've had enough reasons to see the dark side of life. But from a jobs perspective, jobs are coming downstream. There is, I think, businesses are restless to get out there again, to grow. And there have been some changes. I think retail is one field that there are going to be some very long-lasting changes in life. But I think clearly hospitality will bounce back, because it must, because, you know, we all want to go and eat in a restaurant and have a drink outside somewhere and carry on with our lives. Theatre and cinema, particularly theatre, undoubtedly, maybe not cinema, we've all gone a bit too attached to Netflix, haven't we? But theatre has certainly will bounce back eventually. And that's reflected in the jobs market. Things are now, as Victoria said, really beginning to energise. I think there's plenty of cause for optimism. And I know if you're looking for work now, it may not feel like that. But I would also say the more you engage with people who can assist and the more you talk to people, as Victoria said, the greater your chances of having strong positive outcomes from this.
Sorry, Annette?
Yeah, I mean, from my business angle, and then leading on to what ORT does, you know, I see what's happened as a springboard to new possibilities. Okay, and there's so much uncertainty in the world that we have to focus on what we can manage with certainty, because that helps our brains to transmit more positive, what's the word? I've got that craft syndrome moment, positive stuff. And we go.
That's a good word.
Rewards. And so we have to think, what can we manage with certainty? And actually, the pandemic has given us time out to reflect and think, we don't need to shoehorn ourselves into jobs. And certainly, I would say sort of mid-40s upwards, and then I'll come back to the ORT side of things. It's important to really think about, what is it that I want to do? We can shoehorn ourselves into jobs. There's lots of jobs we can do, but there comes a certain stage when we need to think, what is my ideal job? And, you know, start looking at job descriptions, not to apply, but to look and see which bits of those job descriptions align with you and which bits don't. And are there some gaps there that you want to do some skill development for? And I think it's been really a good time to reflect on where I am, where I want to be, and then think about the ideal job description. Because again, in the Jewish community, we are very fortunate that networking is massive, but we need to go to someone and say, this is what I'd like to do, how can you help me? And leading back to the mentor-mentee program,
Yes.
that does, you know, it's important that what mentors do is they don't have to find a solution for the mentee, but what they do is they're a sounding board. They help them think, you know, does the student actually like interacting with people, or would they rather be on the computer doing research? Do they prefer data? Are they more creative? And, you know, do they really want to do something meaningful in society, or they're much more about earning as much money as possible? And the program really helps students at 16, 17 start thinking for themselves, and then start thinking about how they would describe themselves. Are they sociable? Are they interactive? Do they prefer their company? And start to put together their personal profile. And again, start looking at job descriptions, looking at companies, looking at the website, and see what words are picked out from the companies.
Just a second, Annette. Just Annette. Sorry about this. Ari, could you mute yourself? Sorry. Thanks. Sorry.
You know, as has been said, LinkedIn is so fantastic. Look at some of the personal profiles and think, you know, it's hard, especially for students, but I would say for everybody, to start with a blank piece of paper. So look and think, what word resonates with you? What word would describe me? And start to put some words together. And, you know, for the students, we help them think about during the pandemic, where it's been very difficult for them trying to study at home, are there neighbours that they could deliver food for? That's voluntary work. Is there some babysitting? Can they go and do some childminding? All those sorts of things. So helping the students think outside the box. And that's what we've been doing a lot with the mentor-mentee program. And, you know, again, you've got to start thinking about who you are. There's no point in parents saying, I want you to do this, because what happens is the students, they might go into apprenticeships or they might graduate and they suddenly think, that's not who I am, that's not what I'm all about. And actually, although it was a bit weird all those years ago, you know, I qualified as a dentist, my whole family are dentists, and I was thinking, now what do? I've done that. I'm not miserable, but I'm not happy. And what we need to do is really help people think for themselves. And I think that's been a positive of the pandemic. And I think we really need to, as MMA says, you know, look at the positives. It's a springboard to new possibilities.
And Annette, sort of guest 14, whoever they are, raises two good queries. One which you think you've touched on in terms of how do students and grads give themselves the edge? You know, obviously there's a whole pool of unemployed, more
How do
senior.
they give themselves the edge? Well, very much to what Victoria and Emma has said. You know, these days, there are so many stages for graduates or for people who've, you know, maybe done apprenticeships and they want to move on. There's so many stages to interviews, and they might get through various assessments and then they come to the interview. And you have to prepare. And really, no one ever prepares enough. You have to go on the website, look at the careers, look at investor relations, really look at the news. And then what I would suggest, along with the others, is, you know, you can practice on Zoom, on Teams. You can record yourself. I do a lot of filming with people and I play back. And then you think, gosh, I didn't answer that very well. How can I be more succinct and specific? You can do it on your iPhone. You can, you know, record yourself and think, how many ers and ums were there? Could I be heard? Was there passion in my voice? Did I speak so quickly that the impact of what I've said has failed to reach someone else? And we can do that already with students, but at every stage, when people are going for interviews, they have to do this. And the pandemic has meant more and more is remote, and more people are doing virtual interviews. So it's important to get the camera in the right place and to practice, practice, and practice. But so many questions, we can find out lots of questions, but we have to think of what the answers are and be succinct and specific and practice and practice and practice.
Yes. And Emma and Victoria, sorry, Emma?
I was just going to add something, looking at guest 14's question.
Yes.
We've been running this month, April, is for us at Work Avenue Graduate Careers Month, as it happens. And we've been running a series of webinars, 2 a week, every Tuesday, every Thursday, where we invite a small team of professionals in a certain field of work to take students through their working journey, how they graduated themselves, how they started in that field of work, how they developed their careers, what went well, what didn't go well at the same time. And students have the opportunity to network, as Victoria said, and really understand, you know, take inspiration from professionals who've done it themselves. And one thing, to your point about what's going to give students and graduates the edge, one thing that is coming through so loud and clear, I can almost say it in one sentence: be interesting and interested, be engaging and engaged. It really comes down to that. Oh, plus hustle a bit. You've got to hustle quite a lot, ask questions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, which can, by the way, feel the most terrifying thing in the world. But let me tell you, when you've done it once, when you've had what you perceive to be a difficult conversation the first time, second time, it's not quite so difficult. And the third time, it's even easier again, and so on and so forth. But literally engaged and engaging, interested and interesting, and you're well on the way. But, you know, again, loads of advice behind all of that. And
Alex, again, touches on a point. Being Jewish obviously has sometimes been a great advantage in terms of networking. There's been all the charity breakfasts and the networking events. And they make the point that we haven't got that at the moment. Obviously, there's face-to-face. So how do we use our competitive advantage of being part of a wonderful community in this day of Zoom and isolation?
Shall I
Victoria,
I'll offer a few thoughts. Apologies, Alex, for not answering your question the first time round. I mean, there are networking events. There are lots, more and more by the week. Ort did a fantastic Zoom breakfast the other month. And there are networking events from BNI and lots of others. So there are events to go to. What I would say that the quality of networking, the ability to networking isn't the same at them, it's harder. When it comes to networking though, what we're finding is that people are very, very giving of their time. So for example, if you want to have a chat with somebody in a particular industry or field or job role, whereas in the past you had to sort of contact them and say, can I come for coffee, or I happen to be passing, will you give me time? And they were often a bit reluctant because you might pop in and stay too long and they didn't have the time for it. Now we're finding people are really much more accessible on Zoom. So if you drop someone a line and saying, I really could do with a favor, a quick chat, but we'll just put in 10 minutes or 15 minutes on Zoom, people are far more likely to give you that because it's contained. They won't get stuck. You don't have to have any of the small talk and the getting the coffees. You just get in there and have a chat. So I really recommend giving that a try, trying to get some networking meetings in there and book them on Zoom.
And I think with LinkedIn, again, you need to know what you want. What is the purpose of networking? What outcome do you want? And that's where you've got to know what you're looking for and have some idea what you want to get out of that conversation. And then if you go on LinkedIn or talk to people, they might know someone who knows someone. And this is where we're very lucky in this community. People are genuinely happy to connect you if you know what it is that and what are the reasons why you want to be connected. So you do have to do the homework yourself, but there's so many people out there who are happy to connect you to something.
Yes.
I can only endorse what Victoria and Annette both said. What is networking after all? Quite simply, it's talking to people. And talking to people, we can demystify it completely. It's networking has become a thing, hasn't it? It's are you good at networking? How much networking do you do? It's become this thing that we all now attribute power to. But if you simply break it down to what it is, all it is talking to people. And talking to people, as Victoria said, actually, perversely, has never been easier. It's slightly different in its platform. In some ways, as certain aspects of it have been lost, but there is no doubt that so many aspects have also been gained.
And this section of our chat's also about drafting CVs, and I think it's guest 14 again. In terms of set out of CVs, particularly if you're going for creative roles, do you have to make them wild and wacky in terms of presentation, or do you think it's the actual detail that's in the CV that's the critical thing, or is it a combination of both?
Victoria, do you want to start or shall I?
Yeah.
Victoria.
So it does really depend, and there's as many views on this probably as there are types of CV. We probably should ask Avi, actually, our Schul's marketing manager, for her view. My personal view is the most important thing is that it's easy to read, that it's laid out neatly. There are no typos. You wouldn't believe the amount of typos we see in CVs. And I'm sure you would all say you would never send a CV in with a typo or a spelling mistake or something, but we all see them every day. So whether they should, for creative types, they should stand out, I think a little bit of something that stands out and eye-catching would be good, but it's always difficult because you don't want to veer on the side of gimmicks, gimmicks with sort of funny photos or red paper or anything can be perceived as a gimmick. On the other hand, someone else will say that's creative and it stands out. For me, as long as it's neat and tidy, very clear what your impact is, your achievements, lots of blank space so it's not too crowded, then I think a completely personal choice. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I'm pretty much, I couldn't have said it. Yes, totally. People's perceptions of you are their reality. And when they look at your CV, they've never met you. You're a piece of data on a CV. You're not a real living, breathing human being. So they're going to gain a perception of you from this document. And if their perception is, as Victoria said, that there's typos, you're sloppy because there's typos on your CV. Well, no one wants a sloppy person in their organisation. You've killed off your own application. If, as Victoria also mentioned, it's a bit too gimmicky. Gimmicky can have, it's one of those things that's high risk, and high risk by definition can mean high return, but it can also mean catastrophic, epic failure at the same time. So you have to ask yourself, what is your appetite for risk when it comes to putting yourself out there? And for some roles, it can work. We tend to err on the side of, like in most things in life, a little bit of risk, but definitely not too much. So something that helps, as Victoria said, helps you stand out, but nothing that's going to make you look wacky, unless your desired aim is that someone's perception of you is that you're totally wacky. And there are a few roles for which that is potentially appropriate. I'm guessing in your line of work, Paul Deacon, wacky CVs don't really cut the mustard too much.
Very, very boring, plain,
Yeah.
but it's the content. And like you say, it's the attention for detail, particularly if you're going to be a lawyer or any industry.
But I would also say, to Victoria's point, and to the earlier point that I made, perception is reality. So it's as important, if not more so, the general impression created by your CV. In other words, as Victoria said, well written, elegant, enough white space, easy to look at, rather than the minutiae of every single word, which doesn't mean that as the writer of your CV, you don't address carefully every single word.
And I think first impressions count. We work with the students, and it's the same when they're older. Yeah. First impressions count. You know, if someone's looking at lots and lots of CVs, okay, and there's too much distraction, then that will get discarded and another one will become. Same way there's mistakes, it gets discarded. And I think sometimes your personal profile at the top, that's the header, they get an idea, they get a sense of who you are. And when you're in an interview, it's important to be able to walk the talk. And there's no point saying you're sort of organized and you're adaptable if then everything is chaotic around you and you're very rigid. So everything you do is you're selling yourself, and that impression is perceived as your, translated to, can you do the job?
Looking at slightly differently, the tactics, another question by guest 14, who is on quite a roll tonight, and Emma, the hustler, if I could call you the hustler. The question.
I'd rather you didn't actually, Paul, but carry on.
But your phrase about hustling in the process has been raised here. In terms of salary, you sat in the meeting and it's the elephant in the room. How much dosh are you going to be paid? Who raises it and when? Any views?
Yes. It's a very delicate subject, and it's one that we Brits are, we have a natural aversion to talking about money at the best of times, and there is good reason for that. In an interview process, my advice to any, at interview stage, bear in mind when you go for an interview, you are not yet the preferred candidate of choice that they must yet have in their organization. They're still working through that. They're seeing 1, 3, 5, however many people for interview. So at that stage, you don't want to give the employer, the interviewer, any opportunity to question whether you're right for the job or not. You want them to love, adore you, and be utterly focused on you as the right person for the job. Once they've offered you the job, that becomes the point at which they have made that mental leap from thinking about any one of these applicants to do the job to deciding that you and only you are the right person for the job. You are their chosen candidates, their person of the future. They've gone through the process of visualizing you in their workplace. So not before that time do you ever, if you can help it, have a conversation about salary. It just is, it potentially allows them an opportunity to say, no, we don't like what you're saying. You're not going to fit into our structure, our organization. And you become a thank you, but no thank you. And they focus on the other people. So don't talk about salary until you are their, the person they've offered the job, the person they want. Now, sometimes it's unavoidable, I should say, because sometimes employers will ask you, they'll ask you, A, what you're currently earning, and B, what you're looking for. So they've asked you direct questions. And in that case, obviously you have to make a response. So again, you have to think about, do your market research first, understand what the market will support in terms of salary, because presenting yourself as an outlier, in other words, a salary that is way too low, or also a salary that is way too high, is seldom going to work in your favor, because you're an outlier. You're just not going to be there. An interesting option sometimes can say you want to earn a salary that is commensurate with the demands of the role and your experience. In other words, sort of flannel it a bit and throw it back at them. But I've also known scenarios where employers force someone to say something, and the only way you can answer that is by understanding the market of the role you're applying for and responding in the context of your own experience and skills.
Victoria, Annette, any views?
I totally agree with that. Nothing to add.
We have one mind, Victoria.
We do.
Looking at distinguishing yourself, we've had a question about whether you should have a photo on your CV. Any views?
I think it goes back to the previous thing about standing out, creative roles. And it depends on the industry very much. On the whole, I don't think photos do very much. What are you trying to show? That you're what? That you're younger, that you're older, that you're Jewish, you're white? I just don't know what it tries to show. And I think that space is better. Just lots of nice blank white space. I think we touched on it earlier. But CVs get an unbelievably short time that they're looked at. And I think for those of us who spend hours and hours and hours and days crafting our CVs and get help from Work Avenue and Resource and everything else, to actually be looked at for seconds. And so if the really important stuff isn't standing out straight away with no other distractions, very oftentimes it gets cast aside, the CV.
The other thing is that a lot of companies are very focused these days on mitigating unconscious bias. And they will say, maybe even put your initial for the first name, don't necessarily put your date of birth, so that if you then put a picture, it doesn't help mitigate unconscious bias. So there's no rights or wrongs, but if a company is particularly focused on D&I and mitigating bias, then they're not going to be looking at photos. So it's a difficult one to call. I think more and more, as Victoria says, if you can sell yourself on who you are, that's what's going to make the impact.
I've seen videos produced, by students and applicants, sort of 2-minute snippets in terms of why they should hire somebody. It isn't a chance to get your unique personality over. Obviously, you've got to be presentable and have a good personality if you can, but it can, that can differentiate you more than the picture, possibly.
LinkedIn, I think, as Sherry mentions, is a really good place to show more personality.
Yes.
Whereas on a CV, you tend to write it in the third person. It tends to be very much about the person. LinkedIn is a chance to write in the first person. I do this and I do that, and have more personality, have more snippets, details, anecdotes. But sometimes I think video CVs can be quite good, and certainly for graduates, for new graduates, a video CV can be very useful.
I think it shows initiative, doesn't it? I mean, whoever I come across, whatever stage of life, I always Google them. And even the mentee that I'm working with at Jump, I actually found that she had done, during lockdown, she'd done this video with her younger brother on what clothes she should throw out and what she should use. And it really her personality shone through. So that shows me the sort of type of person. I mean, she's more extrovert, she likes to socialize and all those sorts of things, which, it does give you an insight into someone. So is it about you? Does it align with what you're looking for? If you want to do that, no one's going to say don't do it. But the CV, it can often go through a filter system, and that might stop you.
Sherry makes the good point, by the way, about your photo, that it will be on LinkedIn. I think your photo should always be on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. We would say to not have your photo on LinkedIn is disadvantaging you. It's you must and should have your photo on LinkedIn, but not on your CV.
Yes, and a professional one. I saw one picture of somebody drunk in a gutter. I think it was, to be honest with you, on a WhatsApp picture.
You're playing double.
Say again?
Did you pay him double?
Yeah, I liked him, but no, I mean, be aware that everything is in the employer's domain now. So it is a serious point. You know, if you've got any dodgy Facebook pictures, get rid of them.
And that's what I say to my kids in their 20s and students, you know, without being precious, you do have to have awareness about where people can look you up, and you want to make sure you're represented at the best, you know, in all those different places.
Absolutely. Now, I'm aware we're getting to the hour mark, so I think we've only got about 5 minutes allotted left, but I do want to make it as interactive as possible and to answer the questions that are posed. And somebody's raised a point to me that they've been on long-term sick leave for the last year, and I think people have had difficulties that may have caused some absences, and that's going to come up on a reference. Do they have to, you think, explain the illness and the background? I mean, how open should one be if one has had an impasse like that over the last year? Any views?
I can start with a few views. I mean, firstly, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's, you know, as if we all haven't had enough to think about and worry about to have had a huge life experience like that personally is just adds to the personal challenge that anyone face. And I hope whoever has had that to deal with is trying to, in a position to start working forward in a more optimistic and positive way in life. Absences, employers traditionally don't like absences on CVs, and it goes back to a very strange historic thing that you know, years and years ago there was this sort of received wisdom that someone had an unexplained period of time, and this is going back decades, not just recently, a period of time on a CV. Sort of the inference was, were they in prison or something and unable to work because they were in prison. Now, obviously, for some people that is a reason why they haven't been out in the workplace. But for many, working lives have changed. There are health difficulties. Also, people have gaps in their working for all sorts of reasons. Many of them, of course, represent major challenges in life, but not all of them. Some of them are by choice as well. So I think, firstly, there is a greater understanding that, you know, you've got to bear in mind that in the olden days, people left school, started a job, continued in that job until they retired, age 65, took their pension, drew a pension for a certain number of years, and then dropped down dead. And that was kind of a life story. And that's how sort of occupational pensions were built, on that actuarial model. It worked ever so neatly. In today's world, the model just isn't like that at all. For all sorts of reasons, life expectancy, working patterns, technological change, you know, greater flexibility, and the list goes on. So if you have had, sadly, a period of absence due to illness, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing that would potentially feature on your CV. But that said, you know, I think I would definitely not go into detail, particularly at the time of CV. I don't think it's your private business. It doesn't have to be slapped across the place. It can be masked, depending upon, you know, if it's a year, that's quite a bit of time. You know, people can, I think, in some ways, the pandemic allows people to have a little bit more license in terms of why they haven't necessarily been working. So there's ways and ways of masking things and accounting for time. If your sick absence also has had and is going to have an impact on the nature of how you are able to work moving forward, that might also be something you want to think about in terms of how you account for it, because as well as your past, it might also be your future. So again, I would think about that. So it's very hard to give an absolute response on that. But I would say, if someone's asking that because they've got a real reason to ask that, and it would depend upon the circumstances, yes, account for it, but you can account for it in a number of flexible ways, some of which can be construed positively. And at the same time can be offset and balanced, perhaps with other things that you've done and have been doing during that year. Perhaps you've been able to volunteer in a certain way, or you've learned something, or you've engaged in community, or you've followed some webinars. You know, time can be masked, managed and accounted for in lots of different ways. I hope that's a little bit helpful. Without knowing the precise circumstances, it's very hard to give a precise answer, but be rest assured there's always a way.
I also think that when we're in the gap, we think, oh, it's terrible, but actually retrospectively use that gap and think, okay, what did I do? I reflected on the sort of role I wanted going forward, and actually I want something that's more flexible. You know, we all now know that, you know, people have seen people coming into the Zoom, a child or a pet or the Amazon person, and there's the positive thing is that there's a bit more of a reality check. So people aren't as, I don't know how to say this anymore, black and white about things like they were in the past. If you've been ill, it's okay to say there was a period of time when you weren't working and this is what you did, and turn it round to sort of think, actually what I did was I reflected on what I really want to do, which is why I'm applying for this role now, because of A, B, and C, which is what I realized I wanted to do. So turn it round to be a positive. You're not making things up, but actually, you know, more and more employers will see gaps and they want to see what you have come out of that with, rather than it's you know, shoved under the mat, as it were.
Victoria, can I ask you to conclude, just in terms of the psychology, you know, if somebody's going through tough moments, they can't get a role at the moment, are there any sort of tips of the trade to remain upbeat and look at the light at the end of the tunnel?
It is really difficult, and certainly we see that if people taking a while to find a job, we do see people can sort of appear to go downhill and get more and more disheartened. And if each week that you're not successful, it can become like a vicious circle and you can sort of lose self-belief. So I think the answer is really to work with employment advisors, work with Resource Work Avenue, have someone do it with you so you're not alone. We would check in regularly with clients to see how they're doing, or have one of our volunteers to call regularly. And we do lots of online sessions to get people together. And I think it really helps just to show that you're not on your own. It might take a bit longer to find a job right now, but there really is a job for everybody.
Annette, Emma, Victoria, thank you so much for your time. And all the participants, I hope that you can hear that we could have spoken for an hour on each subject. You know, there are people, we're very blessed to be Jewish in this community, that there's wonderful people like the three here who are there to be there in your time of need, to help you take the next step. And I think the overriding message is do not be shy to use the unique resource that you've got.
Shall we put our details in the chat? Is it worth making sure our contact details?
I think Avi may distribute them. I'm not sure.
Absolutely fine.
But we're not going to be hard to spot. You can check us on LinkedIn as well. But, you know, we really wish you all the best. And we hope the end of the pandemic is nigh, and only health and happiness for all of us.
Don't we just?
Have a good evening.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.